Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Vance Boisjoli, and I'm the school manager here at Royal Roads for the School of Environment and Sustainability. And it's an absolute pleasure to acknowledge the traditional lands of the Algonquin-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. We're fortunate to be on these lands to carry on our educational pursuits, but just also enjoy the beauty and the richness of the land and all that it brings with it, including the Esquimalt Lagoon, which has been an important gathering places since time immemorial. So we're very grateful to be on this land, and we're very grateful to be presenting to you from this land today. I also want to recognize that Royal Roads has the distinction of being a Changemaker campus, and that is part of the Ashoka U Changemaker Campus program. And there are very few universities in Canada that have this distinction, so we take pride in the fact that we have an innovative approach to education that we believe prepares students as they address world problems, encourage others, and act for the good of all. So today, we will be talking about climate change through systems thinking. And I'm very fortunate, or we are very fortunate, to have three of the members of the faculty of the School of Environment and Sustainability joining us today. First, we have Dr. Leslie King, and the School of Environmental and Sustainability Professor Leslie King's life has been dedicated to environmental education and in inspiring and empowering people to enter and excel in the environmental field, solving local to global environmental problems, including climate change and biodiversity loss. Excuse me. Her research and teaching interests are integrated environmental sciences and planning, Indigenous environmental perspectives, environmental justice, climate change and biodiversity, environmental governance, and knowledge systems, including local and traditional ecological knowledge. Before coming to Royal Roads, Leslie King was faculty at the University of Vermont, the founding chair of environment at the University of Northern British Columbia, founding dean of the Clayton H. Riddle Faculty of Environment, Earth and Resources at the University of Manitoba, and vice president academic at Vancouver Island University. She has developed environmental programs in Canada, the US, and Africa, and designed curriculum from undergraduate to PhD programs and environmental literacy and anti-racism across the curriculum. Her research sites are primarily in Africa and the Arctic, as well as in Indigenous and local communities in North America. She has supervised scores of graduate students and takes delight in involving her students in her applied research and bringing research findings into the classroom and community. Leslie currently serves as the director of the Canadian Centre for Environmental Education, as well as the program head for the Masters of Art and Masters of Science of Environmental Practice, and the Bachelor of Art and Bachelor of Science of Environmental Practice, as well as the Graduate Certificate in Science and Policy of Climate Change, and the Undergraduate Certificate in Indigenous Environmental Leadership. It's also my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hilary Layton. A lifelong apprentice of nature and psyche, Hilary Layton is professor, psychotherapist, and registered clinical counselor in private practice. Drawing upon the wisdom of ecopsychology, depth psychology, general systems theory, the work that reconnects and embodied nature and arts-based practices, her scholarly research and teaching seeks ways to extend the notion of the individual psyche to a world ensouled, inspiring a whole human, ecologically intelligent epistemology, and cultivate reconnection with a sentient earth. She examines and reflects the ethical dilemma, suffering, and loss of our relationships with wilderness and contemplates learning as an initiatory journey towards maturation, regeneration, and a more soulful way of belonging. Founding director of the continuing studies at RRU for over a decade, she curated leading-edge courses, certificates, and public events. As director of individual study in the College of Interdisciplinary Studies, she assisted graduate students in creating meaningful, personalized pathways of study. Hilary has been a faculty member in the School of Environment and Sustainability for the past 8 years and program head for the Masters of Art in Environmental Education and Communication and the Graduate Certificate in Regenerative Sustainable Community Development. She teaches ecopsychology, supervises graduate students, publishes and presents nature-responsive research, and is co-lead on the farm at Royal Roads. And finally, we have Dr. Robert Newell. He is the Canada Research Chair Tier 2 in Climate Change, Biodiversity, and Sustainability. Newell's research focuses on integrated planning and policy, stakeholder engagement, and sustainable community development. He applies systems thinking to identify relationships and tensions among critical sustainability imperatives, particularly climate change mitigation and adaptation and biodiversity conservation, and other sustainable objectives. His research often employs community-based, participatory approaches for developing knowledge and tools for supporting planning and decision-making, such as system maps, integrated models, and visualizations. Newell also teaches course on critical sustainability issues, such as climate change and biodiversity loss, and approaches to sustainable development. Newell was the Associate Director of the Food and Agricultural Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley from 2020 to 22. And he currently holds a research associate position with the Institute. Newell is also a Banting postdoctoral fellow from 2017 to 2019, researching integrated models and visualizations as tools for community planning. Newell uses a variety of quantitative, qualitative, and spatial methods in his research. So that was a lot of information, and I'm sure our panelists will speak more to it as we go along. But I'm just going to quickly say that we're coming to you from the School of Environment and Sustainability at Royal Roads University, which includes a number of different programs at different levels, from undergraduate certificates in Indigenous environmental leadership to bachelor's programs in environmental science to master's in environmental practice. So you can see the list of the programs here, and of course, you can find out more information on our Royal Roads website. We also offer different program delivery methods, including blended, some online, some during residency, online, and then fully on-campus programs. So today, our agenda is going to start with Dr. Newell giving us an overview of systems thinking and why it's critical. We'll also look at highlights of specific programs and research in the School of Environment and Sustainability. We'll have a conversation where we'll have an opportunity to ask questions and we'll provide answers, and then some general information about Royal Roads. And so, without further ado, I'd like to present Dr. Robert Newell.
Great, thanks, Vance. So I'm just going to kick things off a little bit by talking about systems thinking. Why is it important? Why we do it? Well, let's just start off with what is systems thinking? Systems thinking, it draws from sort of the application of general systems theory. And that could be understood as the scientific exploration of wholeness. So looking at different components, how they interact and act as a whole. Meaning you're understanding these things, the real world phenomena and issues in terms of their complexity. Now, this is important to do systems thinking because the world is complex. And big issues that we're dealing with right now, highly complex. So let's take an example of climate change. What happens if we apply systems thinking to climate change? Well, one of the challenges we see from it, one of the effects that we see from it would be changing weather patterns. So let's say we have an increased frequency of extreme precipitation events, lots of rainfall. Now, when you think about this in terms of systems, what you understand is how this sort of effect can have impacts and then indirect impacts and other effects, and that can keep going on. Then you understand the wholeness of these effects. So in the case of extreme precipitation events, let's say you have a lot of erosion. That erosion could go into waterways. You say you have a lot of water that's coming over impervious surfaces like concrete. That could bring pollutants into waterways. Now you're having these compounding effects on waterways. That affects the fish in there. That has an ecological effect for all of the creatures that rely on those fish. But guess what? Through socio-ecological systems, now we can start mapping these things out and looking at these issues. Those fish, like salmon, could be very culturally important. So we're seeing these ecological effects. We're seeing effects that happen to communities that rely on these fish. When you start understanding and mapping things out through that systems perspective, you understand the complexity of these issues. You could also then start understanding where to put your interventions, where to start targeting things so that you can address these issues. So for instance, Let's say we want to look at this erosion issue. Part of the issue was the fact that you're having erosion coming off sides of slopes. You are having water going over impervious surfaces. Let's set up some green infrastructure. Let's set up some vegetation to stabilize the slopes, to catch this water. Maybe we could put it near waterways too, so that some of that water that has pollutants can go in there and get filtered. Now what you're starting to see is ways of being able to approach these systems issues at different points of the systems map. But then let's go a little bit further. We can also think about this in terms of co-benefits. What if we design this green infrastructure in terms of pollinator plants? Now we're starting to see a new ecological benefit. What if we get really clever and we just design these green corridors that go right across waterways and things that can have trail systems? Now we're doing good things for community health and offering different mobility beyond just going with cars, right? So what you're actually seeing here is using that systems thinking for something that we call integrated planning. This way you can plan not just in the realm of climate action, but now you're also seeing we're doing planning for biodiversity conservation, setting up those green corridors, that green infrastructure in a clever sort of way, setting up transportation pathways that could use active transportation. When you map out the system, it gives these opportunities to be able to do that. Understand the issues in their complexity, but also understand the approaches through that integrated lens. Two other things I want to quickly mention about systems is they also help you understand the dynamics of these issues too. In the climate world, one of the really important things to understand is this really concerning thing that we call feedbacks. So feedbacks kind of refer to when a system effect sort of stimulates or causes a more system effect. So in the terms of positive feedback, let's use a very clear example of wildfires. So climate change can increase droughts, it can increase the conditions for wildfires. That will cause more carbon go in the air. It causes more of that climate change issue that we see with the greenhouse gases in there. So now you're seeing systems effects. Let's talk about socio-ecological systems. Here's a bit of a interesting one. Let's say climate change makes things much hotter, which it does, and we have the extreme weather events. People start using air conditioning a lot more. A lot bigger draw on the air energy sources. Let's say we're still stuck on fossil fuel energy, which many places are. Then now you're actually seeing an exacerbation of the climate change effect. So in that sort of case, then you're starting to look at those dynamics and ways of intervening in those dynamics, and that would be energy transitions. And the final thing is systems happen at multiple scales. So if we see climate change effects that happen to certain food systems, food producing places, then yeah, that's going to have a local effect that will affect the agriculture there, affect the communities and people that rely on this agriculture for livelihoods, but it also affects where these sort of things are, these agricultural products are going to. So you can see systems also give you a sense of how things interact at multiple scales. So anyway, that's my spiel on systems thinking. I think I'll stop it there.
That was great, Rob. Many thanks. So I'm going to talk about a few of our programs that really illustrate and embody those connections that Rob was just talking about. I think I'll start with the undergraduate programs. So first, the Certificate in Indigenous Environmental Leadership is a program that is a certificate program that has 10 courses and that really tries to prepare Indigenous leaders to return, although most of them never leave, to their communities and provide a leadership role in identifying and addressing the problems in their territories. And I think that this program really does embody those connections that Rob was talking about, because many people say that Indigenous people have a much better holistic view. They're very place-based. They understand the connections among these issues. And so that program covers a wide range of environmental issues in Indigenous territories and approaches to resolving them, if they're ever resolved. So next is the Bachelor in Environmental Practice That's both a BA and a BSc program. This is a degree completion program that provides the final 60 credits or 2 years of an environmental practice program. And that has some wonderful qualities, such as using courses from other universities. It's an entirely online program. And I should say all of these 4 programs are online programs. So people can join from the most isolated communities or people who have obligations, which mean that they cannot come to a face-to-face course on a campus. So the Bachelor in Environmental Practice is a wonderful way for people to switch career trajectories to environmental trajectories, or people who are already working in the field but who need credentials. Then the Master of Arts or Master of Science in Environmental Practice. This is another extremely interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary program. All of these programs have transdisciplinary elements because the students work in real-world settings, either in the course of the program or in the final capstone courses of the program. And that's also true of the graduate certificate in Science and Policy of Climate Change. I like the commonly known, affectionately known as SPCC. I like to say that this program gives you the fastest and most efficient way to a credential in this burgeoning field of climate change. And it also recognizes those connections. So students look at climate change through different lenses. And Rob teaches the first course in this called the Science and Impacts of Climate Change. So if you were interested in what Rob had to say about these connections, take the course and you'll get a lot more. And it really does combine the science of climate change with the social and human dimensions of climate change. It also, the third course in that program is a practicum in which students work in and for organizations who are trying to address climate change. So they both gain from the experience of those organizations, and they help those organizations to apply some of the learning that they've had in this program. I think I better stop there. I could go on all day, but I'll pass it over to Hillary. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Leslie and Rob. It's really good to hear. You know, we work together very closely, but it's always good to hear what kind of energy is pouring out of these beautiful courses. So hi, everybody. Nice to nice to be with you today. Yeah, I'm the program head of the MA in Environmental Education and Communication. And it's beautifully designed as a 3-course graduate certificate, and then a all coursework diploma, and finally the MA. So there's many ways you can begin this program and finish it up. I'm also I'm the program head for the graduate certificate in regenerative sustainable community development, but I think I'll leave most of that for Rob to talk about because we share Rob. We're so happy to have Rob with us, that he teaches in the center piece of the real crown jewel of that certificate. But I'll say a little bit about what we fondly call the MEEC program. And you know, when we're talking about climate change, this is human change for climate change, really. We've designed this program with the earth in mind, and we are concerned with a kind of holistic education, a new kind of episteme that includes the whole human as well as the more than human world. And this is designed for teachers and journalists and all kinds of outdoor educators and policymakers and consultants and artists and farmers. I mean, it's really quite a rich mix of people. And while we're concerned with the difficulties of the world that are going on, we're also concerned with beauty and wonder. And we look at ways to bring a full climate range of emotion through our learning as well, which is often lopped off and left out in a kind of colonized curriculum that, you know, tends to get very myopic in mainstream education. So we really have broadened our courses to do things like include ecological awareness and ecological identity. How do we fit within that whole web, that entangled web that is our ecology? And what does it matter? What does it matter what we do and how we speak and how we teach our children and ourselves? And so we look at learning theory that actually mimics the natural world. We look at pedagogies of relatedness. We have a beautiful systems course that starts right at the very beginning with Alexander von Humboldt, and even goes back further to indigenous thinking, but comes all the way through Goethe and into Stephen Harding, and just beautiful applied projects and assignments that, you know, we start to really understand systems in a kind of embodied way, not just through our thinking process. We have even research methods that embody a kind of psychological, clean approach to asking questions that matter. And worldviews and ethics that really look into multiple perspectives, which are needed in whole systems thinking. And finally, our last coursework in the MA before you go off and do research is a field school up in the Broughton Archipelago with an amazing instructor who's a National Geographic explorer. And we spend time working within an Indigenous community, and students come back to campus and do a final eco-psychology course where they really immerse with the land and bring in that ability to feel a full range of emotion and be witnessed in community in that way. So we're really stretching what it means to educate ourselves. And, you know, it's just inspiring to watch what happens from a personal and then expands out to a planetary significance when students come through our courses. Yeah, and I mean, what else do I want to say about that? I just want to say that while it doesn't sometimes feel like a direct connection to climate change, it doesn't, you know, necessarily education isn't a direct connection. Everything we do matters. And that's the adage that we take, that everything is connected. As Rob was mentioning when he was talking about the water, we look at the tentacularity of everything, including our emotions, including our own identities, our own sense of self, our own dreams, our own ancestry. Everything that connects into this present moment matters. So we're looking at this very large holistic view in Meek as well. And yeah, I mean, I use the word tentacular, which is a, you know, Donna Haraway's favorite word, just that we're just really realizing that you pull on one thing and you're pulling on everything. So we design our programs and our learning with that in mind. And yeah, it's kind of an enlargement of the both and rather than the either or way of teaching. So not one right answer. I always say there's not right or wrong, there's right and left in Meek. So anyway, so I'll leave it there and move on to Rob, just to say, Rob, thanks for talking about the certificate.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm following Leslie and Hillary as I'm teaching in both the grad certificate in regenerative sustainable community development and also the one in science and policy of climate change. So being an instructor in there, I can give you a bit of some nuts and bolts and what we actually do in these courses. Before I do that, I think it might be worthwhile to just share a little bit about what I do in my research, because these courses actually draw from the type of research that I do. As I was mentioning, my research focuses on systems thinking, but particularly in that sense of integrated planning and policy. So this idea of how we understand different issues and challenges and strategies and how they interact with one another. And I use systems methods for this. Now, this sort of research, well, integrated planning, just in general, myself and many will argue that you need to have participatory processes in order to make it work. There are two ways of understanding this. One is in a very practical sense. With this sort of systems thinking and integrated planning and policy, you're looking at how a whole bunch of environmental, social, cultural, and ecological factors connect with one another. So if that's the case, it just makes sense to involve a bunch of different folks that have direct experience and knowledge in these different factors. So yes, that participatory part is key. And there's also the principled explanation for it too, which people have a right to have a say in how their home places and places of value develop and how they're managed. So if I believe this, like many others, that integrated planning requires participatory, inclusive, engaging processes, well, then I bring it into my research, practice what I preach, so to speak. And most of my research is very community engaged. So I work with communities to create tools for trying to understand how to tackle different issues, things like climate change, a lot of food system stuff, but a variety of different issues using this systems lens. And my research, in a really sort of rough way, actually has a bit of a 3-step formula. So the first bit is working with communities to try and identify the issues and the complexity of the different issues, right? So for instance, we're doing one in the Millstream Creek watershed right now, and this project is looking at watershed management issues, things of value, things that we want to preserve and protect in the watershed, and then this other component of potential strategies. Now, when we look at the issues and these things of value, what are the potential strategies to be able to try and address the issues and protect the things we value? Often what will happen in these processes, we'll map out systems. We'll use this information to map out different ways of looking at this issue affects these things of values, right? So we talked about the erosion issue and how the water impacts can affect both ecological and social aspects of the system. And then looking at where the different strategies, potential strategies might fit in there. And that's the first phase. So I'll work with communities to try and identify the issues and different approaches for addressing these issues. The second phase is more analytical. So this is sort of our value added. We'll use a whole variety of different systems methods. These are like systems modeling methods. They can be quantitative, they can be qualitative, they can be spatial mapping methods. The idea is to take all this information, to take this stuff that the communities want to explore and do a sort of an analysis type thing and bring it back to them and say, hey, this is sort of what we found. Hopefully this will give you a little bit of an idea of the pros and cons of taking different ways forward, of taking different steps, implementing different strategies. And then the final step is trying to make sense of this complexity. When we go back to the communities, it's hard to just give them, like, for instance, in a modeling process, 350 lines of data and say, here you go. Is that helpful? No, it's not. So what we do is create tools to make sense of this complexity. And these could be interactive systems models. These are also maybe perhaps one of the more interesting things that I do, interactive visualizations where people can walk through a scenario. We use video game software to create these sort of virtual worlds, and people can toggle on different scenarios and say, this is what it looks like and might feel like on the ground, sort of speaking to people's sense of place when they're looking at those different strategies or scenarios. So that's the research that I do, and then bringing that into this realm, these courses, we use and we work with a lot of these systems methods. There's a lot of tools for systems mapping. In the graduate certificate in regenerative sustainable community development, we're working with a tool called Loopy, which will allow us to map different issues, local sustainable development issues in the communities. And these communities are the home communities of the students, so it's something that's relevant to them. And then map things out. How these issues affect different social, environmental, economic factors? What are the indirect effects of these sort of things? And then the cool thing about Loopy is it's a very intuitive tool that it's actually fairly user-friendly, but it allows you to actually do system simulations. So you can actually see how these dynamics work. So the purpose of doing stuff like this is it will expose you, give you an idea of what sort of tools are out there in the systems mapping world, and also help you stimulate that systems thinking. We'll also bring in other aspects of research into these courses, such as at the end of the course, we held this online workshop where people could discuss the local issues that are happening in their communities, their local sustainability issues, and try and draw from each other's conversation about these are the local issues, how they're happening here, and these are the sort of strategies that we can approach for them, share ideas about how you might tackle these issues. What are the commonalities of these issues and how we might tackle them? So it's a workshop that is a bit of a learning exchange for trying to address these local issues. And we do it online because my research does a lot of online workshops, and we use a lot of online tools for engagement. So the idea is that you could start thinking about tackling those local issues, but also exposes students to some tools and techniques for doing online workshops. And then just briefly, I'll just talk about the science and policy of climate change. So this is another online course. And as Leslie was mentioning, it says highly interdisciplinary. So we start with a lot of the science, why climate change is happening, talk about climate change scenarios as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has developed these things. So you look at a lot of this sort of stuff. You learn about climate modeling. But then we kind of move into a lot more of an interdisciplinary view of it. So we look at, for instance, the interactions. There's a whole unit on the interactions of climate change and the biodiversity crisis, which are tightly interlinked issues. And it even sort of goes into the realm of climate justice. So now you're getting really much into the social science there. The course, truthfully, when people first get into the course, they might be at first think like, wow, this is very science heavy. And it's like, might seem a very, much more science heavy than what you might be used to, but it's a course designed for everyone. So anyone can kind of join in this one. And what I mean by that is the assignments that we do are topics that you're interested in, and they range. So people will do their final projects on things like climate change impacts to wetlands, ranging from there to climate communications, what strategies work and what don't. So you are exposed to a lot of different aspects of climate change, but it's not something you should be intimidated by. It's just there, so it gives you a richer knowledge, and the stuff that you work on can be things that are of interest to you and directly applicable to the things that you work on, the things that are important to you in your life. And I also want to quickly mention too that we do some systems mapping as well. We use a program called Kumu, which a lot of people find very fun because it is interactive, and it allows you to make fairly simple systems maps that people can click on, and you can look at the different connections and learn a little bit more about this systems map. So probably you're getting a sense of that. In my courses, I definitely like to expose you to a lot of different tools, online tools, some of the things that are coming up in life. I'm going to close off by saying we actually even use ChatGPT in the Regenerative Sustainable Community Development course. So this idea of like less, I know there's a lot of concern around AI, but we can also use it as a tool. In this case, we use it as a tool for scenario generation. Say like, hey, maybe if we do some clever prompts in here, we can figure out and create a scenario narrative that will help us think about how to plan and develop our community, trying to see if we can use it for planning purposes. So yeah, there's a lot of good content stuff, but hopefully it also gets you, gets you into different techniques and tools that you can use too. And that's it for me. Yeah, I think you gathered that.
Well done.
That was great, Rob. Thank you.
Good stuff. Yeah.
So before we move on to the next part, Leslie or Hillary, do you want to, or is there anything you want to add to what Rob said? I guess related to systems thinking, or maybe some of the research work that you've seen some of your students do that have kind of impressed you and really made you think.
Thanks, Vance. Yeah, I'll jump in, Les, if I can.
Sure.
I was just thinking while you were talking, Rob, about, research that makes a difference. I mean, that's what we say about the grad search, that the work, what you do live with students in their home communities, in their municipalities, is just research that makes a difference, not on some dusty shelf somewhere. This is like live action. When we worked with cities before with that certificate, it was really working on those wicked problems that they didn't have the legs for. So it's really fantastic that people work where they live. I was just thinking also about one of our students who is a teacher in the school district here, and he just created a maker space. So he was using design thinking, which we also used in that certificate before, and he worked with students and teachers and district folks and the librarians and parents, and using art and design thinking, they reimagined the really dry, desolate school grounds into something regenerative and, flourishing and biodiverse. And they, using clay and, nuts and bolts and limited amount of art supplies to really create something that was just beautiful. And his final project was all these amazing ideas about rain gardens and bringing back the creek and planting more trees. And it just so happened that a woman who worked at Saanich Parks was there, and she knew that there was trees that need to be planted, and they've run out of space in Saanich where they can designate this. So right at that event with the school kids, she was able to say, hey, I've got some trees for you. I mean, things like this are happening. This is like actually making change through research. And yeah, I just love it. It's radical collaboration with some of the unlikely suspects that you would ever see designing, school grounds. So the kids said that they felt empowered, and changes are already starting to happen at his school, and he just finished his research. So I just love that. I love how we're all sort of reaching out in those different ways. Anything you want to add, Leslie?
No, I just want to say that the student projects at the end of all of these courses are so very rich. And we always have a virtual conference at the end of these courses where students present their findings. And they are so diverse. They're as diverse as the environmental problems we're facing, and so very rich. And I could talk all day about them, but I would rather hear from you. Vance, why don't you go ahead and talk about the university and have some Q&A? If we have time, I think we do.
Sure, we have lots of time for a Q&A,
Yes.
so I'll ask
Okay,
people
great.
right now, if you have any questions, feel free to send them through in the chat. You can either post them to the group or just send them directly to Ariana and she can share them with us. I do believe there was a question, is that Miyawaki Forest Project in Saanich? Hillary, I think that's for you.
Milwaukee. I don't know. I'm not sure what the Miyawaki Forest Project is in Saanich, Rob. So maybe you want to unmute and
Sounds interesting.
yep. No idea.
Yep, not fully familiar too, but definitely something I'll follow up on.
No, not this Rob. I think his name is
Oh,
Rob.
so that Rob, yeah.
Two Robs.
That is
We
confusing.
have another
Too many
Rob.
Robs.
That's right.
This was one of our other students who actually works for Saanich, and she just happened to know that there was extra trees, and she was happening to be a participant in this makerspace. I mean, that's how things do come to be. We have another student right now just finishing, and she's the lead on the farm at Railroads. We started a farm a few years ago, and her final project is all these incredible story maps that reach out into, the community and talk about, no-till and, regenerative agriculture, and bring in stories and folklore and recipes and personal reflections and videos and stories. And it just acts as a teaching tool. So her research isn't just research, it's something she can continue to teach and share, and we'll put it up on our website. So it's all very active, which is what I love.
Oh,
I
thanks, Rob. That's great.
Yes, good
Let's
afternoon.
put a link up.
Miyawaki Forest is a specific method that's designed to grow forests up to 10 times faster than natural by careful planning of 4 layers of forest, from canopy through tree down to scrub down to surface.
nice.
It takes a space that's only 100 square meters, so long as you have anything at least 4 meters wide, and is very popular with schools.
That's
Wow.
great.
It focuses on indigenous sacred forest philosophy and replanting native species that have been lost or languished. So it is a native species orientation, but it has a number of benefits and plus sides, not least of which is it brings communities together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And Roger also had a question about Rob's slides, and Rob directed Roger to his research site. And Rob, did you put that up for everybody or just for Roger?
Oh, no, that should be, everyone should be able to have access to that.
Okay.
And the thing that might interest folks about the research site. So I was mentioning visualizations too, and there are examples that you can download, which we keep as much open and accessible as we possibly can. So you'll there's a bunch of tools that you can download, and also a bunch of working projects for systems maps, interactive systems maps you can play with. We have some loopy things that are embedded in there. So it's more than just kind of a bunch of text. It'll give you some examples of the things that I've been talking about, and the things that you might be able to interact with and engage with. The other thing to mention about community engaged research is that since we work with communities, we want to produce knowledge that is accessible to communities and also produce in a timely fashion. So sure, there's a bunch of journal article publications on there, but we also produce a lot of reports that are meant for diverse and wide audiences, right? So you could browse through some of that stuff too if you're interested.
Thanks, Rob. That's great. Questions? Other questions? Questions about any of these programs?
Mhm.
Roger?
Yeah.
Rob, you mentioned that your
You want
team,
to
Oh, sorry.
unmute Roger?
I think Roger is trying to unmute. And are you able to, or?
Ariane?
Yeah.
No.
Nope.
Can you put it in the chat, Roger?
You should be able to unmute now.
You can
Oh.
unmute now. Good.
Thank you. Wondering if you are working with groups like Climate Caucus with elected officials, because so much of what you've got just has direct application in so many communities. And just, you almost need a funnel to shoot all that information into the people there. It's,
Yeah.
have you explored that with Climate Caucus?
Not specifically Climate Caucus. We do actually have some regional groups, people that that we try and use to disseminate the information to communities beyond just the ones that we're working with. But yeah, it's one of the challenges about this sort of research and sustainability research is that there is no one size fits all. So really, what you're doing is you end up doing research that works with a specific community, and you develop the tools and the process with the community, and then afterwards just open access as much as you can to say that here are the systems, maps, and models and approaches. Feel free to adapt to your own context. But I am part of regional committees, right? So there's the BC Climate Action Committee that's specifically focused on agriculture, like ACARN. So joining some of these working groups and committees allows me to keep in contact with other groups and say, hey, you know, these are the projects we're working on. Let's try and disseminate and move through it. But yeah, a Climate Caucus would definitely be like a group that that I would definitely volunteer to do a presentation for. If groups actually reach out to me, then I will do that as well, right? So I'll often get requests to say, hey, like, would you do a bit of a presentation for instance, even like, you know, small Nordic groups to like larger province-wide committees and groups. But yeah, I know that sort of like a bit of a roundabout way of saying like, yeah, definitely in my ballpark, but not specifically. I haven't connected with them.
Okay. What have we got here?
Any other questions?
I just see Jackie from Oak Bay are planning a Miyawaki forest, which is great.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No other questions that I see in the chat. Feel free to keep them
Rob
coming.
urged us to think about the victims of climate change, including some very recent victims.
Mm,
Thank you, Rob.
that's right. Yeah, thanks so much for that.
Well-
You know, the other kind of irony here, I would say, when we're talking systems, is acting like a system. And we're an organization, like all kinds of organizations, that are asked to do many things, and we're all going through growth and growth spurts and changes. We're now a 20-some-odd-year-old organization, and so we're going through our own changes, just like other organizations in the world. And so to act like a system organizationally and programmatically and as a school requires radical collaboration and you know, looking at all of the imperatives whenever we're making decisions. And so, you know, it can be very ironic that we teach one thing and we do another. So we have these conversations often about how we can bring, you know, our wholeness, our whole selves, and our school as a whole, and our university as a whole into this, you know, conversation where there's, you know, definitely coherence and relationality and mutual causality always at the forefront. That's kind of a primacy for us. So yeah, it's interesting talk about climate change as a subject and as learning, but also are we living and acting like a system in all that we do? So that's a question we wrestle with a lot at Royal Road.
And Julie just had a question about whether we're thinking of other programs and combinations. And I'd like to ask Julie if she has some ideas. We're always thinking about new courses, new programs, keeping up with this incredibly complex field. And Rob and I were just talking about a food systems program, for instance. But Julie, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this.
We got her there.
Not.
No. Okay.
Nope. Okay.
I know that Rob and Leslie, you've mentioned food systems a number of
Mhm.
times before. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an example of what specifically that you're thinking about and why that seems to be an area of need right now.
Sure. Yeah. There's a couple reasons. Well, one is just it's something that people are interested in. Our students are often want to do projects on food systems. And coming from the Food and Agriculture Institute, prior to taking this position, they'll often reach out to me about doing projects in this area. So there is that interest. There's another aspect around it is that that food systems are quite interesting in that I've heard them defined as all the processes between production to processing to distribution to access and consumption, and the social, economic, cultural, and ecological environmental factors that surround them, right? So that's a pretty broad field when you start looking at what is connected to food systems, which means that it becomes a really, really, really good platform for understanding systems challenges and systems complexity. So it becomes very interesting in that approach. But then there's this other aspect, and my postdoc and I have chatted about this a fair bit too, is that interesting enough, as complex and highly connected food systems are, and as important as they are for us to think about and to create resilience, and there is very little in the way of training people as food systems planners. Food systems planning, just in general, is a fairly it's a fairly, what should I say, like it's a coarse instrument, right? Often it's looked at in terms of like agricultural land base and how much are we farming, right? But that's only really just getting at, a small aspect of it. And, more and more, as these challenges become really complex and we're thinking about how do we create resilience in food systems and create more local or flexible or nimble and robust food systems, a lot of this challenge is going to rest on the shoulders of local government and local municipalities. But these are not necessarily folks that are trained in food systems planning and ways of thinking about how to approach these issues, right? Combine that with the fact that we're developing a whole new variety of different food systems, of food production techniques, such as indoor agriculture, vertical agriculture, and things even like cellular agriculture, creating animal products without the animals. Now we have like a whole variety and diverse array of different food production techniques that have their own opportunities, but their own challenges as well. And they fit into planning in different ways. So we're kind of trying to think about this food systems challenge and food systems planning, food systems strategy through that comprehensive sustainability lens. And there's a big need for it. People are going to be thinking about this issue more and more. They're going to have to grapple with it more and more. And we are in a position where we need professionals that are in this space to be able to tackle it. I should just mention too that, and I'm going to put a link in the chat just in a moment, where I did a project with the University of the Fraser Valley. It was a collaboration project where we started engaging folks in workshops and seminars to try and see what would be of interest to create or to put into a vertical agriculture course one that takes a more comprehensive look at vertical agriculture, not just the technical aspects of it, but also how these new emerging technologies fit within broader food systems. So we produced a report on that just to show you some of that early thinking of the sort of things that we might need to teach. And it stimulates sort of thinking about what would be useful to have in a modern day food systems course. And I'll pop that the link to that report in here just in a moment.
Not least of all,
It's
we have
also a
farm
question.
soil roads too, Rob. You know, if we were going to do something in person, we also have the hands in the soil part of the farming aspect too.
Right.
So not to get too far away from, you know, what that also means. And yes, sorry, Leslie, do you want to ask the question?
No, there's a question in the chat for Rob,
Yeah.
which I
You wanna
think is
ask
an
that?
interesting question.
Yeah. So this is skills that I got when I took my master's at Rural Roads. Is that the question?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, I actually, I like this question a lot because it gives you I can talk about my wiggly pathway to get to where I am today, right? My first degree was in biology and statistics. So it was very much a natural science sort of approach to looking at the world and studying the world. And then it wasn't until I got to Royal Roads where I started off in the Masters of Science stream, and I was going to do stuff around water analysis, water quality, that sort of thing. But just because Royal Roads has an interdisciplinary approach to teaching stuff, it kind of started stimulating my thinking about other ways I can go with my skills. And like a lot of people in my world, that when you do natural science stuff and you want to make a difference in the world, you realize eventually you're going to have to deal with people. So I started shifting over to a Master of Arts, and I started integrating more social science in the work that I do. And then I did a PhD in geography because I had no idea where I fit by that point. I was doing such interdisciplinary work that, geography, as long as it has to do with place, space, time, or scale, it's a geography project. So that's how I sort of got into that sustainability study stuff, looking at things a bit more comprehensively and trying spanning the disciplines. My most recent credential is a graduate diploma in planning from Waterloo, because I was just doing so much planning stuff that eventually it kind of made sense for me to do that. But that's I'd say that's what Rural Roads helped me with. It really allowed me to kind of look across the disciplinary aisle and steer my research direction to get where I am today.
Can Julie be unmuted now? She has.
I think I am.
Yes.
Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you very much for this invitation. My name is Julie Lennox. I have just returned from about 37 years working in Central America and Mexico. I am a graduate from RRU. I was in the second year of the MALT program, Leadership and Training, which was so wonderful, so useful in my work. And I would really enjoy maybe a more in-depth discussion about food systems. I studied at McGill Food Systems in the 80s. And I have to say it was a lost discipline for a couple of decades. And definitely, and now there's much more interest in it around sustainability and climate change, and have worked on that with agricultural partners in Central America. But I've also spent 15 years working around adapting public investment and public infrastructure to climate change scenarios.
Wow,
And I was just wondering if there's any work been done, or if engineers who are involved in public infrastructure here have been involved in your courses.
The short answer to that, Julie, is yes. The long answer is the importance of infrastructure for climate solutions. And I think Rob deals with that. In the second course of SPCC, Alistair deals with that. But we don't have any programs or courses that focus on that exclusively. But it's a very important consideration, and we'll certainly be thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Great.
And welcome home.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Vance?
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was just going to add to what you're saying, Leslie, because I definitely we have certainly had engineers come into our courses. Often they engineers are coming in just to broaden their knowledge and expertise in the courses. So I had one engineer that started looking into the legal matters of climate change and climate impacts, right? Just to get a more rich perspective. So our courses are kind of designed that way. The one that's I teach is really around the science and impact. So, there's this temptation to try and get into the solutions and approaches to it, even though it really is mostly kind of centered on the science and impacts. This being said, people will be able to use the knowledge and that broad-based knowledge, looking at the issues from that, the climate change impacts from that science perspective, the natural science perspective, and also social science perspective, and do projects such as, for instance, I had one student that did a project looking at different coastal defenses and the different approaches for using something that's more of a natural wetland type defense and something that's more like the hard barrier, right? So comparing the hard and soft barriers. So those interests can be explored through the courses on that foundation and bed of a broader knowledge around it.
Yeah, and that's a great answer, but engineers will tell you that they're interdisciplinary and holistic. But they really do come in and add a great deal to these courses. But they learn also, and they are broadened also. Roger, you probably have something to say about that.
Well, yeah. My political and professional capital is not at an all-time high.
Yeah.
I sit on the advisory committee for Fortis and BC Hydro on their planning, and trying to convince them that they are not selling electrons and molecules, they're providing comfort and convenience. And if they don't change their business model, watch out. And all of the interactions here that we're seeing, this interdisciplinary aspect, transdisciplinary, is fascinating. This is such a huge challenge. We need people like yourselves to reach into these communities and let the people know that. That's why I was asking about Climate Caucus, because it's so important. A lot of these people are so well intentioned, they just don't have all the tools yet. And so your programs, if you could reach into those communities, it would be fascinating to see how many people you could get sign up from Climate Caucus on an online program.
We do get a lot, Roger, and that's one of the advantages of these programs. They are targeted to mid-career professionals and people who are working in the field. And the programs really are designed to accommodate their time frames, so they're available to them. Sorry, I realize that Vance is trying to tell us something here.
But this is also about widening circles too. It is, Roger. I mean, this, when people do come and learn, then they go out and the ripples widen and it keeps going. That's the whole foundation of education. We often don't have the time to go out ourselves. We're doing the depth work here so that our students can be the change agents, the change makers. Yeah. Go ahead, Vance.
Well, I just put this up here. I'm not trying to rush you, but I know this is there's a lot on this slide, but we are always looking for students, right? We want to spread this information and we want to make change. And so, whether you're interested or know someone that is maybe interested, we ask you to share this information. We have all of our programs, as Leslie said, that were shared today are online programs. Hillary's program is a blended program, so online and some residencies, but there's more information at Royal Roads, and anyone can email learn.more@royalroads.ca and basically get more information about the programs, in addition to, of course, looking at our website. So that's information there. And Ariana just put in the chat, she'll be sharing this information as well if you've registered for this webinar. And
there are the three of us.
There's the three of them.
We might look a little different.
Look a little different.
Those are three of my students at a beach party on our final day on campus. So, yep.
But please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us about anything we talked about today or about anything in your future. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here and hear everybody. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lance. Thanks, Ariana.
Thank you.
Great
My dear
session.
colleagues
Yeah,
and everyone
everybody.
who joined.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.